Good morning and welcome to Midweek Money Matters with the Pennsylvania Department of Banking and Securities. Today we're going to be discussing the importance of checking our credit reports and information that we need to understand that we're looking for. We are recording today's session, so if you have questions, please feel free to enter them into the chat box. Otherwise, I'll stop the recording at the end and we can ask live questions at that time. So one of the things that we have to understand is, what is a credit report? The credit report basically tells the story about our financial history with credit. But the thing that we have to make sure of, and this is why checking our credit report is important, is that we need to make sure that it's an accurate history of our habits. So checking that credit report is critical. And I'm sure that we've all heard about the importance of this and how we can do it. So first of all, let's talk about the fact that our credit report is a report about us. Our credit score is sort of a report card about the information that's contained in the report. And it's actually broken down by subjects. So 30% of our grade is the amount of money that we owe in credit. 35% of our grade is our payment history. So if we have a history of making late payments, our credit report card is going to negatively be impacted. 15% of our credit is the amount of time that we've had credit. So you often hear about not closing your credit accounts. The reason we don't encourage people to close accounts is because if you delete or close an account that has a 25-year history, 15% of your grade is the length of your credit history. If you delete an account that's 25 years old and your next oldest account is just a couple of years old, you can see how that's going to bring that grade down. So we also look at new credit and the mix that you have, whether it's all credit cards, whether it's a mix of secured debt like car payments or mortgage payment or car loans or mortgage loans, and a mix of unsecured debt like credit cards. So it's really important that we understand how this all comes together to create that score. Now, today we'll focus on checking the credit report. It's important that you understand when you pull your credit report, and we're going to talk about how to do that in just a couple of minutes, but it's important that you understand this does not include your score. The important thing to remember is that if your credit report is accurate, your credit score is going to be whatever it is. So ensuring that the report is accurate is the best thing that you can do to make sure that the grade that's reflected is accurate. So you want to make sure that you keep close tabs on that. So when we start to talk about our credit report, the things that we're going to focus on today are how can you get your copy? We're going to talk about what exactly is on it, because I think you'll probably be surprised. And then we're going to talk about what you're looking for and what to do if something isn't right. Because it's not uncommon to find mistakes on our credit report. And just about 10% of people who have mistakes on their credit report have mistakes that actually will negatively impact their score. So we go back to, we need to make sure the report is accurate so that we can have the grade that we deserve. So first of all, we want to talk about where we can get our credit report. We can get our credit report from annualcreditreport.com. This is the only credit report that's mandated by the federal government to be free to consumers. So this is your safest place to go to get the information that you need. Now, you can pull your credit report under normal circumstances from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion once a year. However, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So the credit reporting bureaus have actually stepped it up, and they're allowing consumers to pull their credit report once a week from every bureau. Now, this is really important because it shows that it gives us the opportunity to make sure that the information that's being reported about us is accurate. In this time of financial uncertainty, a lot of people are having to make decisions between which bills to pay. Pulling that credit report every week helps us to be able to stay on top of ensuring that our credit report isn't negatively impacted when we're having to make some of those tough decisions. So being able to pull that report every week really does go a long way in helping to protect that information that's being reported about you so that you can maintain the highest grade that you can. So once you pull the credit report from annualcreditreport.com, you actually want to take a look at all of the personal information. And you might be surprised at how much information is included in your credit report. Your name, any name combination that you've ever used to apply for a job or credit. Addresses. I was surprised the last time I pulled my credit report, I found addresses dating back over 30 years, back to when I was 18 years old and just moving out of my parents' home. Telephone numbers is another thing that's actually reported on our credit reports. And even some employers report to credit bureaus. So when you look at that information, you need to make sure that all of that information is accurate, because if it's not, it can either be a simple mistake because there are humans that are doing data entry and putting this information into our credit report, which is why we can see where such a high percentage of individuals have mistakes. But it also can be an indication or a red flag that we may have been a victim of a fraud or identity theft. So that's something that we need to make sure that we check really closely. The last time I pulled my credit report, there was an address and a telephone number that didn't belong to me. I had pulled it online from one of the bureaus. I very quickly was able to report it, and within about 10 days, I received a new copy of my report that had been corrected. So it's not always a difficult process. It's just important that we check it and do what we need to do. So the next thing we want to do when we're looking at our credit report is we need to make sure that we verify existing limits and balances. An increased limit without your knowledge can indicate that someone has taken your personal information and used it to call your credit card company and request an increase in your limit. Now, if I did that, that's one thing. But if someone else did it, that indicates to me that there could be a problem with my credit. So it's important that we look at those limits. And then when we look at balances, a higher balance than you remember could be a red flag that there's a problem. Now, whether that problem is, oops, I spent too much money when I was shopping, or even worse, oops, someone has my credit card information and they've been using it to shop on my dime. Either scenario, checking those balances can be a wake-up call for all of us. So the last thing we want to look at when we're pulling our credit report is we need to look for accounts that may not be ours. New accounts are a huge red flag that you may have been a victim of identity theft. I like to tell stories because I think they help us to remember important things like this. A couple of years ago, I met a woman who said, Katrina, I was a victim of identity theft when my sister stole my identity to take out a mortgage to buy her home. And I swallowed hard and I kind of gave her this blank stare because I didn't actually think I understood what she was saying. I said, huh? She said, my sister bought a house using my credit. And I didn't find out about it until she lost her job and she couldn't pay the mortgage payment anymore. And now suddenly I've got a mortgage company calling me about a debt I didn't even know I had. Now, that's an extreme story, but it's something that's true. And it used to be that new credit in our names wasn't necessarily a big problem. What we've found recently is that new credit in a consumer's name is actually the number 2 form of identity theft now. So it's not such a far-fetched issue. So it's important that we look for those accounts that may not be yours. And in a couple of slides, we're actually going to talk about how we can freeze our credit. But we'll talk about that in just a couple of slides. Next, let's talk about something that appears that isn't quite right. If something is on your credit report that's minor, you want to make sure you report it to the credit reporting bureau that has the inaccurate information. If you believe it is a major problem, you want to make sure that you report it to all 3 credit reporting bureaus. Now, it's not uncommon for them to assure you that they'll take care of it when you report it to one. The issue is that computers don't always do what they're supposed to do, so communication doesn't always happen. If you're talking about your credit, or I'm worried about my credit, I am going to absolutely make sure that it's done properly, and I'm going to report it to all 3 bureaus. Now, if you've heard me present during Midweek Money Matters events in the past, you'll know that I encourage consumers, no matter what the issue is, to keep a notebook. Keeping that notebook is going to go a long way in helping you to remember what you've done and what you haven't done. There's no difference here. When you see something that's not right, particularly, as I said, if it's not that easy fix, make sure that you keep a notebook and keep track of what's happening so that you can go back and look and make sure that things have been repaired. Now, if you actually have a dispute to a debt, the credit report that you're looking at should give you the information on how to file that dispute. So maybe there is a line of credit that you didn't open. So you're going to have to dispute that. When you do that, the credit report, as I said, is going to tell you how to do it, but they may not tell you exactly what you need to include. So when you file a dispute, make sure that you provide all of your identifying information, your name, address, telephone number, your date of birth, your social security number. If you're only comfortable putting the last 4 digits, that's okay. The reporting bureau can find you with the information. Then you need to make sure that you outline exactly what you're disputing. So you need to tell the company, to tell the credit reporting bureau that this is not my credit. I did not open ABC store credit card on this date. And then you want to explain what's correct. I didn't open any new credit during this time frame. And then you want to take a copy of the report and circle the information that you're disputing. Make sure that you keep a copy of what you've circled. And then you want to make sure that you send any supporting documents. So let's say you open a line of credit at your local bank and it was approved for $5,000. But suddenly it's showing that it's a $10,000 line of credit. Make sure that you send copies of the documents that show it was the original $5,000 line. That supports what you're telling the credit reporting bureau. Making sure that you do these 5 things goes a long way in ensuring that the dispute is resolved in a timely fashion. Now, Once you send that report, that dispute, the information is going to be reviewed, and you can anticipate receiving a response to the dispute within 30 days. If the dispute is resolved, your credit report is going to be corrected. If the company comes back and says, no, she increased that line of credit on this date, then the report isn't going to be corrected because the company that's reported it has shown proof that that the debt is true and accurate. Now, if you continue to dispute the response, you can actually request that you put a statement of dispute or a statement of explanation that would be included in any of your future credit reports. Now, keep in mind there may be a fee for this, but it may be worth it to be able to add your side of the story. So, one statement of dispute might be that this account is delinquent because of medical reasons, or these accounts became delinquent when there was a loss of a family member. Or if it's an account that you completely dispute that you don't owe, you can actually indicate that this account is an account that's in dispute. It's not your debt. I was a victim of identity theft on XYZ date. This continues to be unresolved. That can go a long way in helping your credit report to go through if you're applying for credit, or if you've got an employer who's verifying your credit report in order to offer you a position that they're considering you for, or even if if you're trying to move and you've got a landlord who pulls credit, they can see that account is delinquent because you had a medical expense. So things like that can go a long way in helping our credit to allow us to be approved for whatever it is we're applying for. Now, let's talk about how we can improve our grades. Any good teacher is going to tell you what you can do to bring that grade from a C to a B, right? So you can improve your credit score or the grade on your credit report by paying your bills on time, making sure that each and every payment is made on time goes a long way in increasing that payment history. And if you remember from that early slide, our payment history is 30% of our credit report or our credit score. Paying down some of those higher balances. Again, the amount of debt that we carry can negatively impact our score. So we want to pay down those higher balances. And then if you don't need credit, don't apply for it. Too much new credit can actually bring down our credit report score kind of quickly. And then, as I said at the beginning, don't close those older accounts. That's 15% of your grade. You don't want to close an account that shows a long, long history. So keep those things in mind as you start to work towards getting that better grade. Now, one thing that I think is incredibly cool is the fact that we can freeze our credit reports. So remember when I was talking about new credit in our names being the second most popular form of identity theft? If I freeze my credit, that's going to stop any new credit from being opened in my name. That's a great way to protect my identity and my report card, my credit report. Now, it used to be that if you wanted to place a credit freeze, if you hadn't been a victim of identity theft, you had to pay a fee for that. And you had to pay a fee anytime you wanted to lift that freeze. After the Equifax breach, the federal government mandated that credit freezes become free from all three credit reporting bureaus. So you can place a freeze on your credit by going to any of these websites or calling the phone numbers Now, you do have to call each individual. You have to freeze each individual report. You can't freeze one and have them all frozen. But freezing your credit, it's important to understand that a potential employer who may be trying to hire you wouldn't be able to access your credit report. If you're applying to move into new housing, they would require a credit report. If you are applying for new credit or you're asking for extended credit, those are all reasons that you would actually have to lift the freeze. But the good news is it's not difficult to do. So when you place the freeze, the company has to put the freeze in place within 24 hours. So if I were to place a freeze at noon on Wednesday, by noon on Thursday, the freeze would have to be in place. Now, let's say I'm shopping for new car insurance and I need to have that lifted. I can contact the Bureau and they actually have to have the freeze lifted within an hour. So it allows you to access the credit report that's needed so that you can apply for that job, that credit, or that insurance. So that goes a long way in easing it up, making it easier to be able to freeze or lift that freeze on your reports. Again, that goes a really long way in helping with applying for new credit or trying to get a new job. Opening new utility accounts. If you're trying to open a cell phone account or you're moving and you're trying to establish new an electrical account in your name, you'll have to lift that freeze. But again, that has to be done within that hour. So it's not a difficult process and it won't take long. So having that freeze in place can go a long way in protecting your credit report. Now, as we begin to wrap up, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that you can call our Office of Consumer Services during regular business hours. They're happy to answer your questions and they can help you understand what may be happening with your credit report. They can help you understand how making sure that you make that mortgage payment on time can go a long way in helping to, helping with that credit report. They can also help you if you have a dispute about a mortgage or you've got a problem with a checking account. They actually just released their fiscal year 1920 annual report, and the reality was they helped more than 5,000 Pennsylvanians with the financial troubles that they were having about institutions that we regulate, or they had become victims of frauds or scams, and our staff were able to help them to recover from that, provide them with some of those really important tips that can help them on the road to overcoming whatever issues they're having. So you can always give our office a call at 1-800-PA-BANKS. Our staff are, again, they're available during regular business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. We are closed for the major holidays, but if you leave a message, someone should be returning your call within 24 business hours. So they don't take long to return calls. And as I said, if you call and it's during those business hours, a real life person is likely to answer your call. If they're all on the phone, you may have to leave a message, but like I said, they'll return your call pretty quickly. So that brings us to the end of today's Midweek Money Matters presentation. I hope that